Hey, Houston Texans back at it at OTAs. We saw DeMeco Ryans, Bobby Slowik, Matt Burke, the defensive coordinator, and Frank Ross, special teams coordinator, talk yesterday. Also had some good quotes from Gerard Johnson and others, some of the assistant coaches, but they were not caught on camera. So we're going to go through the DeMeco Ryans press conference and J-Rock. I always appreciate the support. Feel like we're a little bit codependent on each other at this point, but I admire you just sitting around and waiting until that moment for me. So, DeMeco Ryans, this just finished processing, so let me pull it up here. Crap. All right, we got to wait even a little bit further of a second for that. You know what? No, we'll just go ahead and son of a bitch. Yep. There we go. DeMeco for YouTube.
Work into what you want to do.
I tried to enhance the audio a little bit so you could hear the questions. We get a lot of white noise, but we start off here with Brooks Cabina asking about Derek Stingley.
Multiple coverage wise.
Yeah, Derek is doing fine. I think he's had a few good weeks. Price continue to improve daily. He's doing everything that we're asking him to do. So I love where he's progressing, and he's doing a really good job of just being consistent. That's one thing you have to be as a pro, very consistent, right? And that's what Derek has done, and he's continuing to do a great job in that regard, leading in his own way.
I guess the first question I have there is, okay, why is he stressing about Derek Stingley being consistent? Is it because there was an issue with inconsistency before? I don't think so. I think that was just maybe there's not too much to tell or show at this point, and there's no need to be gushing about Derek Stingley, who does look a little bit beefier out there these days.
And that, as you've taught I know it's not the offensive side for you, but how has CJ Stroud progressed? It's like he's getting more time early in practices now. But
So asked how has CJ Stroud progressed, and CJ was working with the ones yesterday, notably after running with the twos last week.
what has he shown the past week with this?
Yeah, CJ, again, he's progressing well. I think each day he continues to get better, continues to get more comfortable with the verbiage of the offense, his command of the huddle. I thought this week has been really good. Coming off the long weekend, it was very eye-opening how on it he was, right? From the first day we got back through today, done an awesome job in our situational period. So he's definitely progressing in the right direction, and the sky's the limit for him.
And I think that's one thing that Gerard Johnson, the quarterback's coach, mentioned was that it looked like CJ really over the holiday weekend took the lessons that he learned from last week and put them into action. So he came out this week and just all of that stuff from running the huddle and all of those those things that you need some mental reps at and some experience at. He really worked at it and showed the kind of progress these guys were looking for. I mean, it's a pretty quick ascension in just 1 week for a team that's saying they want a quarterback competition. And we'll see. I mean, maybe we're all reading too much into it, and next week it'll be back to CJ running with the twos.
Can you talk about the shirts you your staff are wearing?
Yeah, we decided to wear orange shirts today ahead of the Wear Orange Day in a couple of days, just in support of, first and foremost, the 1-year anniversary of the Uvalde shooting. And as you guys know, a staff member of ours, Roland Ramirez, is our head athletic trainer. It's a place where he grew up, knew a lot of people there who were involved in that situation. And it's a situation that's near and dear in our heart, and we want to make sure that we support that situation and just the senseless gun violence that's going on. We want to use our voice as an organization, as a team, to make sure that we put an end to it. And it's senseless shootings that are going on around our country that sometimes we can just grow numb to it because it happens so often. But we just have to bring awareness to it and understand the severity of the situation where a lot of kids, unfortunately, are losing their lives to something that's senseless. And we just want to make sure we're supported, get out in front of it. And it means a lot to us. And as an organization, as I told our players this morning, it's bigger than just being great football players. I want our guys to understand that we're more than just players. We're also great men, great leaders in our communities, and our guys are in support of, and I'm proud of the way they represent it from last year, seeing it from afar all the way up to now.
And that's I think one thing the Texans have done with Uvalde and various other causes, they've that they're involved with. They want to stay committed to, instead of just coming in immediately after a tragedy and making a show of it. They'd raised like a couple $100,000 last year for the memorial fund there, and like they stay involved with that. And like with anything like this, obviously it gets super political super quickly. And I think like DeMeco's DeMeco talks a little bit later about this, about his the personal effects of gun violence on him, which was pretty impressive. Just obviously the way DeMeco handles a lot of things.
When you're on draft rookies, Jared Wayne signing a nice adjustment on the deep ball. What have you seen from him so far? What kind of look is he giving?
Okay, so this is a question about wide receiver Jared Wayne, a rookie undrafted free agent out of Pittsburgh, who made a nice adjustment on a deep ball in this practice yesterday.
Yeah, Jared, he's doing a good job as well. All the guys have been working really hard, working really well with what they've been doing. They've been adapting to what we asked them to do. They've been improving, and they're competing each day. Jesse is another young guy that we think has some promising to him. He's doing a good job, and he just has to continue, just like everybody else, just continue to be consistent, continue to try to improve daily. That's all we're looking for out of all our guys right now.
So he said Jesse there. I don't know if he meant Jared or if he said Jared Wayne has good size and ball skills. Easy to see his toughness when tasked with making the contested catch. I'm reading straight off a Lance Zierlein scouting report, everybody. I don't have the straight scoop on Jared Wayne, but the reporter that asked that question, I'm guessing, has a relationship with Jared Wayne's agent. So that's the way the business works sometimes.
Can you talk about the joint practices y'all have set up and the significance of them?
Yeah, excited, to go against the Dolphins.
That was Berman asking about the joint practices that the Texans announced yesterday that they'll be having with the Miami Dolphins and the New Orleans Saints ahead of their preseason games.
Dolphins here ahead of our preseason game, the second week of preseason. I think we can get a lot out of joint practices, especially a team as good as Miami, right? A playoff team, a team that has a ton of playmakers offensively and a really good defense as well. So it's a good opportunity for our defense to go against a different defensive structure. They're more of a 3-down front where we're primarily a 4-down front. So
He's there just saying a 3-4 compared to a 4-3.
it's a chance for offense to get different looks, and it's also a chance for us defensively to get different looks from different players and compete at a high level.
Like the Saints. Like the Saints.
He said, what about the Saints? Which I thought was notable because he did talk. He talked about the quality of the Dolphins offense and whatnot. If I'm Dennis Allen, I'm taking notes. This is chalkboard material for me.
The Saints as well, right? It's our neighbor close by, so it'll be fun to go down and compete against the Saints. And Price, again, just different offense, different defensive structure, different philosophies there. So it's just good as much as we can go against other people and not beat up on each other too much. So it's a good opportunity for us to go against them. Dennis and Mike, two guys I respect really well in this league, have done a great job leading their teams, and so I'm excited to go to work with those guys.
I was trying to remember if there was ever an incident with DeMeco getting in a fight in one of those combined practices, or at least getting in a scuffle. Sometimes DeMeco kind of like any character in a Hollywood movie, a hero in a Hollywood movie, would go reluctantly into something like that, but he would feel compelled to do it, I'm guessing. I think that the most notable non-football drama that I remember him being involved with was, remember when Jeremy Shockey decided that he was going to have it in for DeMeco Ryans one day because DeMeco Ryans didn't have his hand on his heart for the national anthem? And this was long before any protest during the national anthem or anything. This was just DeMeco standing respectfully on the sideline, and Shockey, for whatever reason, deciding to go for a strict enforcement of the flag code, which I do think, I think unless you're military, I don't think you have to have your hand on your heart. You just stand respectfully. But Shockey decided that was going to be the chip on his shoulder that day, and it was so weird because nobody knew exactly why Shockey had it so much in for DeMeco until afterwards in the press conference, and DeMeco was confused himself. I think if I remember, DeMeco got the better of Shockey that day.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. The defensive player and coach your entire career. Now that you're a head coach, is it any different for you to be able to be involved in some of those the offensive side of the ball especially when you're out there?
Is it different being a defensive coach your entire career and now being involved in the offense a little bit?
It's a little different, but it's funny having a conversation before practice with some of the quarterbacks, and CJ's like, "Is it only a good day if the defense does well?" And I said, "No, man, it's a great day when the offense is doing well and we're putting up points. So we're all in this thing together. So it's fun. It's fun being able to work both sides, being able to coach up and help the quarterbacks, help the offense, and also help the defense. Is just seeing it all come together, right? It's just, for me in this position, it's a role of service, and I'm just in position to help out either side of the ball as much as I can.
I will say I did feel both from Culley and Lovey a little bit of a bias towards the offensive or defensive side of the ball. There were times where with Culley, things might have not gone well in the game as often they didn't in that year. But Culley would be more prone to point out some of the good offensive things they did. And then Lovey a couple times last year, I felt like, like obviously I'm biased towards the defense. I still felt like Lovey showed a little bit of bias. That's not something you got to be aware of, because you're naturally going to ball. And I think as a head coach, maybe that's one of the true biggest tests that you can test yourself with is, do you care more about that side of the ball? Are you more invested in the results on that side of the ball? I think Belichick, it's easy to compare anybody to Belichick, but I think Belichick has actually done a pretty good job of being really involved with the defense in New England, but still very much caring a lot, obviously, about the offense. It's not like he was just hands off, here you go, McDaniels.
Continue to be consistent, continue to try to improve daily. That's all we're looking for out of all our guys right now.
Can you talk about the joint practices y'all have set up?
I did it again, didn't I? Damn it. Unacceptable. I get too happy with this mouse here.
Career, now that you're a head coach.
A+.
Okay, this is when he was asked, how are you guys doing so far? We'll let this one finish.
You talked about the fact that you want to teach education. Benchmark-wise, where do you think you are with the team and their progress if you had to give a grade at this point?
A+. We're doing great. A+. We're right on track, baby. We're doing great.
By the way, I think everybody's been pretty responsible in not trying to make clickbait out of that. I haven't seen Mike Florio write a story about how DeMeco Ryans is getting ahead of himself, and soon he'll learn that the season is not won in May. I kudos to everybody. I might be the most irresponsible one in that I put the direct quote there. We're doing well. We're right on track. A+ on the thumbnail. But I felt you could tell by his smile that he was laughing as he said that.
With the joint practices, you got a lot of young rookies too.
Yeah.
Was that part of the thought process of getting them multiple practices against players and teams that don't?
So it was part of the thought process in doing the practices against other opponents because you have rookies who can get more experience.
The thought process behind joint practice, just as a team, I think it's great when you can just go against something different, see different plays. When you go against each other in training camp, you kind of get used to, you know what plays the offense is running, the defenses that you're going to see. So when you can break up that monotony of camp and go against someone else and you get different looks, you get different players to go against, it just helps you as a player to, expand as a player, become a better player going against different, you may have different tails, different techniques that you have to use versus these guys. So it's just good competition all the way across the board going against another team. Doesn't really matter, young players, older players, it really doesn't matter. I think it's just good collectively as a team when you can go out and compete against someone else.
I think two things here. One is, yes, it gets very stale when you're going against the same guys over and over again, and you start to have stalemates with each other. And then the second thing is, and this is really like a danger in NFL training camps if you don't go scrimmage against other guys, especially nowadays when your starters are getting limited reps in preseason games themselves. You can start to delude yourself convince yourself that you're better than you actually are. Some of the mistakes that might rear their ugly head in a combined practice, you just don't see. And that's a real danger, I think, both for the coaching staff and then the players themselves. If you're always beaten up, if you just happen to be on a team that doesn't have any good centers or guards, and you're winning a bunch of pass rushes, and you think you're going to be on track for 17 sacks that year or something, you got another thing coming when you got out against actual competition. So the more the better when it comes to combined practices. I'm glad they're doing this again.
Wrap us up. You were pretty open on why you guys are wearing shirts and the reasoning behind it.
Somebody asked to expand again about wearing the orange shirts, which they're doing in support of Uvalde, Texas, and what got you to that point.
What kind of got you to that point where you view it in that type of strong manner, where you're like, a lot of people losing their lives and senseless? So what kind of got you to that point to where you view it that way?
Yeah, I think, well, personally, for me, I've lost a cousin to gun violence. And, unfortunately, like a week ago, another cousin of mine was shot, innocent bystander. So for me, it is personal because, that's near and dear to my heart because I've lost family, right? And so it is touching, and it does hit home to me, as well as to those in Uvalde as well. And I think it also hits home when for me, I have 3 young kids. So when you send your kids off to school and you have to even have that thought in the back of your mind that, man, are my kids going to be safe? Am I going to see them? It's not the mindset you want to have, right, when you're dropping your kids off at school. So, for all of us, it's something we shouldn't have to worry about. We shouldn't have to discuss, but it's here, and we want to make sure that we bring awareness to it because it is a real issue that hits home for a lot of people. All right.
Yeah, that was I had a conversation with my child the other day about going to a parade, which is, well, it was a conversation that I don't think I would have had, but they asked me about it, and you got to have those frank conversations about it. So it's nice to see DeMeco obviously has a personal connection to that. Before we move on to Bobby Slowik, somebody mentioned Hopkins, and now I can't even find the comment because it sparked a fire in all of you. A lot of reports coming out that D-Hop wants to come back. I don't know about a lot of reports, and then honestly, I haven't checked in the last couple hours, but Roosh Williams, who usually blogs about the Rockets in Houston, he's a good dude, trustworthy, honest, all that stuff. And he had said that DeAndre Hopkins has an interest in coming back specifically to Houston, that he's a big fan of Stroud. My co-host Sean Pendergast kind of checked in with Roosh and, believes that there's a lot of validity to this. I think that this is how I would read this right now. I think that a lot of people are reading way too much into a few little tidbits, including, I did one on the 6 potential teams that DeAndre Hopkins would want to go to. And that was based on 5 quarterbacks that DeAndre mentioned in the I Am Athlete podcast. And then one, the New England Patriots, just because they had shown interest before. I think that it's important, if you go back and watch that I Am Athlete podcast, that's not like a list he had sitting there right at the top of his head, or like he had a notepad with 5 names on it. He was just kind of thinking his way through the league and probably in his mind saying like, well, maybe not that guy. Well, sure. Yeah. Josh Allen for sure. Yeah, I got Pat Mahomes. It was all, you can almost tell from the order that he came up with them in. And I think, I can't even remember who the 5th name was, but it took like a full 90 seconds for him to come up with the 5th name. I wonder if he and his team were a little bit worried, because he does have an agent now, that there was a list of teams that thought they were out of it. And I don't discount that. Yeah, he might want to come back to Houston because he likes CJ Stroud, because he likes DeMeco Ryans, because he has family still here in Houston. I just don't know if that makes it his preferred destination or not. So we can talk a little bit more about that after Bobby Slowik, or during Bobby Slowik, because obviously it's relevant.
Thank you, guys.
What's up?
Okay, so here's Bobby Slowik, who with that hat. My first impression is that he looks like a 12-year-old with Benjamin Button disease or something. Like he's right at that spot where he's aged aged enough to where he looks middle-aged, except he's still the size of a 12-year-old growing up. He doesn't present that small in person. Don't worry about it. He looks like an actual man. I want to just scroll down to the transcripts here so I can help you guys out with the questions in case they're not very audible.
What have you seen so far from C.J. Stroud during these first weeks of him practicing with you guys?
What have you seen so far from C.J. Stroud these first few weeks?
Yeah, it's really exciting. Really, all the rookies in general came into from the get-go with a mindset of they were going to attack this thing. I mean, they've all been mentally in the classroom. They've been getting after it as far as putting the time in. They came to work. They've been buying into what we're telling them to do on the field. Again, it's similar to what Burke had just said when he was talking about the overall philosophy. Like, everything we do really as a football team starts from minutia and grows up into an offensive side of the ball, and then from there into a team. And there's a lot of fundamentals and techniques that go along with that at every position. So quarterback, receiver, back, all the way across the offense. And they've all really came in and attacked it as a group, which is probably one of the coolest things to see with CJ is it's not just him alone. They're all doing it together. And he's been awesome. He's been putting the work in. They've all been coming in for some extra work and doing stuff on their own when they're away from here. They've been doing great.
We played that clip or one like it this morning, and I know one of our listeners on Payne and Pendergast had said, well, great. The guy's getting paid a lot of money to do a job, so what am I supposed to take from that? I get the point. I totally 100% understand it. I do think it's important to point out, though, that like anything in life, there are different levels of things. So, yes, theoretically, you should expect that a group of guys making a good chunk of money are going to come in and do the work. But how much work are they doing in comparison to others who are in a similar situation? And that's what it always comes down to. When you talk about a professional athlete's work ethic, is it the same as working 14 hours digging ditches? Of course not. But some guys are just more naturally competitive, and their parents gave them better work ethics than others. There are some teams where, basically you got guys, if you got a team where you don't care about getting guys with work ethics or anything, it's like having a bunch of lottery winners come in and do a job. It's like, okay, they're not necessarily wealthy because they're hard workers or anything. It's because they won the genetic lottery. So you want to try to get as many of those people that are just hardwired to be competitive to work. So when you hear CJ Stroud doing certain things above and beyond, it's not because he's getting paid a lot of money. There are other guys that get paid a lot of money that don't do that same stuff. So that's just nice to see.
Teaching CJ the offense.
I feel like the guy was trying to argue that I was a bad communist or something. It was a weird argument.
Building it first. What came first? Did you have an idea of what you wanted to go with him with, and then work into it?
And to be clear, I'm a horrible communist. As a communist, people would say, you seem more materialistic than you should be.
Talk about that process of building and also teaching him. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I think every player you have before you're really empowered to teach or coach them, I think you have to have a vision for what they're going to do and who they are and what's going to make them the best they can be. So you kind of start there, and then you branch off into, okay, we need to attack this. This is your strength. Let's make sure we emphasize this. We struggle a little at this aspect. Let's try to work on this to get that improved so that the totality of what we do then fits into what the guys around us are doing, which then fits into the offense. So it's kind of been the same for everybody in that regard, CJ included.
Sometimes when I point out where these guys seem philosophically aligned or they use some of the same verbiage, it is cool that Bobby Slowik and DeMeco Ryans both came into coaching in the same way and at the same time. At least with the 49ers. Slowik had been in coaching with Washington, went off to Pro Football Focus, then comes back and starts kind of at the bottom of the totem pole again with DeMeco, who is also starting out at the bottom. Kyle Shanahan kept it old school, which is, yeah, look, you're a great NFL player. We respect your brain and all that, but you got to start off and learn what it's like to be an NFL assistant coach. So he and Bobby Slowik, you can get this image of these two staying late at the facility, breaking down film, doing all the stuff that the young coaches have to do, and having a lot of conversations along the way to where it's going to be natural that they're aligned philosophically. And one of those things is understanding that guys have different learning styles and they have different needs, and that when you're coaching a team, you can't just do a boilerplate lesson for everybody and expect them all to respond to it the same way. So I really like that. It's a mature approach to the game that makes me feel better about both these guys being first timers in their position.
The majority of the people you're on staff with in San Francisco all went off the head coaching job.
The majority of people you've worked with have dealt with a young quarterback.
The majority of them ended up dealing with a young quarterback, first round quarterback actually, at one point or not. And obviously, I'm guessing you still talk to some of those guys in San Fran.
Obviously, I'm guessing you still talk to some of the guys in San Fran. What have you learned that you can apply teaching CJ the quarterback position?
Yeah, I've been fortunate in that, like you said, I have a lot of connections and people that I'm friends with that I know across the NFL that have been through this process. And I've also been fortunate that I went through it really the last 2 years with Trey and with Brock in a different way. And just getting like the different ways and the different styles guys play, guys learn, they put things together, and the process they have to go through to like get to where you envision them getting to, and the patience that's required when you do that, while at the same time like the urgency that's required when you do that. It's always a balancing act, and being able to bounce ideas off guys or have guys tell you their experiences and what they went through and what to watch out for, which may or may not apply to the situation you're going through, but it's always beneficial when you have people around you that have been through it.
And that's another thing with the Kubshanistan system. I hate to kind of seem like I'm always proselytizing for Kubshanistan, but one of the strengths of it is that it's a genuine system. Like, it's that there's kind of a established process that you can get quarterbacks up to speed in it. And there's certain benchmarks that you want to achieve along the way before you move on to the next level. So just like buying a franchise restaurant, I actually invested in a franchise while I was a player that was a fledgling franchise that had a great concept, but was not a good franchise just because they didn't have it down yet. When you invest in a franchise, usually it's like, oh, okay, because they're going to be able to give me a cookie cutter plan. And if I just follow that plan, it'll all work out. Where in this franchise, it was a whole lot of like calling them up and be like, hey, what do I do in this situation? And be like, I'm plumb confused myself. I don't know. So with Kubshanistan, they've got answers. They've got resources. You can call up Gary Kubiak, who's might as well be a retired Colonel Sanders up north there, and get an answer to a question you have.
Earlier in this process, what have you learned from Tank Dell and Xavier Hutchinson?
Yes.
Okay, as far as what was it called? If you can say the name, feels like they might be litigious. I'm not going to say the name. No, I'll say it. Well, okay, it was a long time ago. It was 20 years ago, and it was Cold Stone Creamery, and it was it was when they were growing super, super fast, and it was one of these things where you had to negotiate the lease. You had to you had to use them to negotiate your lease, and yet you couldn't get them on the phone. So it was just really frustrating that they were growing way faster than they needed to. Since then, I'm sure they've hired, obviously ironed out a bunch of the kinks. It was just I learned a lesson about being on the extreme growth side of a franchise like that. You want to be sure that they can actually handle the growth. This was it was a great concept, and I loved the ice cream, damn it.
Again, it's going to sound like a broken record, but
So this question was, early on in the process, what have you learned about Tank Dell and Xavier Hutchinson, the young wide receivers?
The first thing that jumps off about all these guys is just they come in and they're hungry, and they come in ready to work. And Tank comes from a very different offense at Houston, very, very productive, efficient, but it's just a different style to what we're really doing here. So there's a bit of a learning curve. And I mean, when he's out on the field, he doesn't blink. I don't think anyone's noticed how big of a leap it is because he's been on it and he's been working. Same thing. He's taken what we're telling him as far as coaching, as far as what we see in the fundamentals of route running. I mean, he's a pretty natural separator, but to also apply that, okay, well, how's this fit within the offense? when I know the quarterback has to look at me at this time, and there's a lot that goes into that for him. And I mean, it's been hitting the ground running for him. I mean, it's been not an issue.
That part was really cool because it is true. Like, this is always going to be a concern when you come from an air raid offense or an Art Briles style offense or anything like that. There's certain like core fundamental ways of operating that are going to be different. And that's not throwing one bit of shade in an air raid offense or anything, because an air raid offense is freaking brilliant at doing what it does when executed properly. In college, it's just there are a lot of differences when you get to the NFL. And some guys kind of spit the bit when it comes to learning it. So for Tank Dell, I think like I'd be really surprised if Tank Dell doesn't end up having a lot of reports like this, because you don't get as successful as you are while being that tiny without just having a certain extra commitment and passion for things that you do. So it's just good to hear that he's really dedicated himself to it. And I don't think we should read anything into him not saying anything about Xavier Hutchinson. He went on at length about Tank Dell, and there you go.
The difference is that C.J. Stroud had in Ohio State to here, and I mean everybody's had their story about how he's reached out to learn more. I'm sure you have those too.
So Brooks Cabina asking, what were the differences between that C.J. Stroud had between Ohio State and here? And there have been a lot of stories about him reaching out to people, asking questions. What has his experience been with that?
What have you seen?
Yeah, it's required that he reaches out to learn more from me. But so that's happened a lot. But he wants to have command of what's going on, as anyone who's in that position should. They want to feel comfortable in what they're doing, what direction they have to go, what answers they have to have on every play, and every play is a little different. And for him, being able to tie things back to other experiences that are the same is kind of what we grind through over and over again. And it's really a lot of, again, our offense and our defense as we do the minutia branch out from it. And then at the end of the day, we kind of point back to things we've already talked about and said, hey, this is the same as something else you've already done. And that just helps them hone in on specifics.
And I think too, sometimes Ohio State gets more of a bad rep for being more simplistic than it actually was. And I think that's just because a lot of the direction comes from the sideline into the quarterback. There's not necessarily a whole lot of there's not a lot of deep thinking by the quarterback involved leading up to the play call or what have you. But like the reads within the plays are ones that are not always easy. And we talked about this morning too. I think when it comes to C.J. Stroud not scrambling or, being thought of as too much of a pocket quarterback than what a modern NFL quarterback should be, I don't think he gets enough credit for, at times, being willing to hang in the pocket because he had good receivers that he trusted to get open. And sometimes it takes time for those routes to develop. So, there's a fine line between staring down a route or waiting too long or staring down a receiver versus trusting that it'll come open and it's just going to take a little bit of time. And I think those are the kinds of things that C.J. Stroud might actually be way more adept at figuring out compared to a lot of guys. Like, let's say you come from an air raid system, let's think Hendon Hooker or something. There's a high emphasis on getting the ball out quickly, knowing what your read is and just going there immediately. And sometimes that's hard for those guys to really get and understand the timing and the rhythm of waiting for things to develop. I feel like C.J. Stroud's going to be ahead of the curve compared to a lot of modern NFL quarterbacks in that regard.
Local fans are familiar with the Gary Kubiak offense many years ago, and with Kyle Shanahan running the offense himself.
So Steph Stradley is saying local fans are familiar with the Gary Kubiak offense many years ago and Kyle Shanahan running the offense.
What is the main difference?
What's the main difference or similarities between the offense that they used to run and what you're running now?
Yeah, I was a youngster back then, but I mean the roots are all there. I remember watching when I first got to offense in San Francisco.
And by the way, Mr. Robot on here gets indignant when people are a little too quick to talk about it being purely a San Francisco or Kyle Shanahan offense, when obviously the lineage goes back to Gary Kubiak and then Kyle Shanahan's father in Denver.
All these Houston Texan cut-ups and Andre and Schaub and, David Anderson and all these guys just running the same stuff we're running right now. And the principles and the foundation of what they did is all there, but like everything, it kind of evolves as it goes. So where it's at right now, the core is all the same, and probably the edges have branched off maybe a hair. The league has just changed. There's some different defenses you see. There's some different issues you get. So you find different ways to adjust to that. But it's cool because it ties back to the previous question. You just point to something else that they did back then and be like, hey, this is the same as that was, but now we're doing it this way. So that was really neat when I first got to throw on some Houston Texan film and see all of them play.
Yeah, you know what? Couple things here. One, him talking about watching film in general. I am really intrigued by his experience at Pro Football Focus, just because what he was charged with was really watching pretty much the entire league, and then educating people on Pro Football Focus's staff about certain elements of the NFL. But somebody from Pro Football Focus, I think maybe it was Sam Monson, said that for a stretch of time there probably wasn't anybody else in America watching as much film on the entire NFL as Bobby Slowik. So I think when it comes to, for him to kind of get a glint in his eye talking about sitting in and watching Houston Texans film, I feel like he's one of these guys that might have a little bit of a Rain Man element to him, where he remembers specifically like the moment that he saw Andre Johnson do something, like where he was sitting and when he was watching it and all that stuff. So he's just a full blown, 100% nerd for it, nerd in a good way. The other thing was Andre Johnson and him being around the team. I consciously thought of this, but it hadn't really hit me. It was like, oh yeah, this is Andre's offense. This is the offense he was brought up in for the first half of his career. And I think even more so than a typical veteran helping out younger guys, he can be a resource. For Bobby Slowik, he can be a resource for young players. He knows a lot about just what it's like to learn this offense, what it's like when it's good, what it's like when it's bad. And then the third thing would be, I think the fact that Bobby Slowik says, hey, it's pretty much the same offense, just with tweaks for modern defenses and everything. When this offense is not run properly, or when you don't have the talent to run it, you're going to hear a lot of people say, well, it's too predictable. Defensive backs are calling out the routes, this, that, the other thing. That's not always a bad thing. If you've got the right people to run it, you shouldn't care about the defensive backs calling out the routes, because ideally the defensive backs still don't know whether it's run or whether it's pass. If you're really disguising things properly, and if you've got a hammer in the backfield and a hammer like Andre Johnson, it puts those defensive backs in a bind. And they might feel like they know what routes are coming, but they might be thinking that, well, it's actually a run, or they're still in a bind even if they know which route combo is coming. So there's an element to it where, yeah, the predictability isn't that big a deal as long as you're running it properly. And that's always, like with any type of football, that's the big test.
Still in setting an example standpoint, what have you seen from Dalton Schultz and what's the vision for Dalton?
So what have you seen from Dalton Schultz, and what's the vision for him?
He's just a professional. All the vets we've kind of brought in have really helped a lot in bringing their position group along, and kind of, bringing the young guys with them, showing what it's like to work, to be a professional as far as what you got to do every day, mentally, physically on the field, how you work, how you go about your business. And he's been awesome in that regard. And then, you see a guy who knows how to run routes. He's got a big frame. He knows how to catch. He's fully invested in the run game. So he's been doing a great job.
I got to see this thing with DJ Bieneme. So I haven't seen whatever you're referring to, J-Rock. I'm intrigued now. Very intrigued. DJ Bieneme of ESPN. As far as Dalton Schultz goes, I think that's important when he's talking about just what it means to be a pro. Again, this kind of goes along what the listener I was talking about earlier, who questioned, okay, how hard is it to work hard when you're getting paid really well? There's different levels and degrees. And I think route running is one of those things when, it seems like a simple enough thing that you should know how to run the route tree. And yet, like anything else in life, like if you want to get really, really good at it and better than everybody else at it, there's a ton of attention to detail. And a lot of guys, when they come into the NFL, especially particularly amongst wide receivers, they're some of the most gifted athletes in the world, and they haven't really necessarily ever had to truly refine their route running. So making everything look similar. Remember, deception drives everything. Making your routes look similar, exactly when you go into your break, how it looks like when you go into your break, knowing how to adjust the coverages, all that stuff. Those are the little things that sometimes rookies, if you don't have veterans on the team, rookies don't even know what they don't know. You know, they're ignoring stuff, or they're not getting it from the assistant coach. So guys like Dalton Schultz and Robert Woods, perhaps a DeAndre Hopkins, but certainly an Andre Johnson, those guys can make a really big difference in that. But Bill Barnwell wrote a piece in which one of his criticisms of the Texans was that their average age is too high. They've got too many veterans. They should be all rookies. Like, no. If you've got all rookies on a team, those guys don't learn anything. Like, aside from getting their heads beat in physically, they also mentally are not learning anything. And then you end up wasting draft picks because they don't have veteran players on the roster to help them out. That's why I'm like gung-ho in favor of Casario's strategy of signing these guys, these veteran players, to 1 and 2 year deals. They might just be blue collar guys. This year there was a higher standard, but they're teaching these young guys something ideally.
It wouldn't be fair to Coach Burke if I didn't ask you a question about the defensive side of the ball. What have you seen from those guys as far as looking at Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie?
Yeah, it's hard.
So what have you seen from the defensive guys?
Hard. You know, their secondary makes it hard on our receivers. They make it hard on our quarterback. You know, we got to be able to get the ball out on time against these guys, and when we're running routes where we know we can separate, because they're not going to give you one. You know, which has been great teaching for our whole crew of quarterbacks as far as knowing where to go with the ball, keeping Petrie in the middle of the field when he's in the middle of the field, just things of that nature. I mean, they really strain you. It's been really fun to watch. And as we keep going through OTAs and it'll build through training camp, how their defensive system evolves, and then all of a sudden it gets really difficult for us to know what they're doing and where they're going to be.
That's where like safety is one of those spots that, you know, I always feel like, man, it's such an undervalued position in that there really aren't that many safeties that are worth cornerback type of money. And yet when you have a really good safety, it's like the most valuable thing in the world. If you go back to just some of the defenses that have been decades long, good defenses, go back to the 2000s with the Steelers, where Troy Polamalu was a huge part of that. You go to the Ravens with Ed Reed. And I think that those guys, when they are really smart about disguising, when they're very versatile, especially, it just makes it easier for everybody else. And that's where I get excited about Jimmy Ward and Jalen Petrie, as much for their minds as I do for their actual physical capability. That's where, like, Jalen Petrie doesn't have the same like physical ceiling as some of the genuine freaks in the NFL when it comes to safety, but he does have that little bit of like an educated wild streak, kind of like a Troy Polamalu, where you're like, okay, this guy's got a high football IQ, and I feel like he would jump off of an 8-story building if he felt like he had a chance at making a play. And like, that's a good type of reckless yet smart football play that I like. Jimmy Ward, very capable in man coverage, you know, can play slot, can do all these things to where you can disguise things a lot better. And more importantly than just disguising things, sometimes when the offense changes their formation pre-snap, you don't have to show your hand on defense, because Jimmy can take over for a cornerback's responsibility and vice versa. You can invert things like that kind of stuff as long as you got smart guys in the backfield that can handle it. And right now, you know, Derek Stingley is young, but I feel like with Jimmy Ward and Steven Nelson, they got a couple older vets there. And then I think Petrie is that high IQ guy. I got to stop gushing too much about the secondary until we get to the regular season.
Let's talk a little bit about just the offensive line. DeMeco said it feels like there's going to be strong suits. Can you talk about what you've seen so far?
Yeah, I think every offense in the NFL.
I think Kim asked if the offensive line is the strong suit.
Oh, you want to be
Or DeMeco had mentioned it needs to be the strong suit.
solid up front, and thankfully we have a group up front that's talented. They have the skill set, they have the mindset, they work, they're invested in what we're doing. So they have everything that's needed to be able to perform at a level that we want them to perform at, so that everyone can kind of work as a unit. The run game is a huge part of kind of this system and this offense and how everything ties together. And it's a little different from the guys that have been here and what they've done in the past, and they're all in on learning the fundamentals of how that works, and they're bought in on it.
It's interesting. No, yeah, we'll get back to that. That was his last question anyway. And we'll see, since I've got you all here, we might as well watch the other coordinators too. Oh, it's going to be Frank Ross. But when he's talking about the offensive line there, the 49ers are in a position, obviously, now where they're a mature football team with a very competitive roster. And they also have to make some of these hard decisions about who to keep and who not to keep. I think Matt McGlinchey, the offensive tackle, he got a $17 or $18 million a year deal to go to Denver. And I think McGlinchey is a solid enough offensive tackle. And, maybe it's just the games that I've watched, but he hasn't blown me out of the water or anything. But I think he's very solid, very steady, very consistent. He just got paid a boatload of money. And I think that part of the reason that he might be a little bit overrated is because he's played in this system. He knows what he's supposed to do. You end up playing good football if you're on a team where you can do your job, but you're also using play action a lot. It makes it easier for the offensive tackles. But San Francisco can't afford to pay him. They likely would have had to overpay him a little bit to keep him around at that salary. The Texans are in a position where, Titus Howard might be that same guy. I know that Titus Howard is a different type of player than Matt McGlinchey, but I think I might grade him out as about the same. And Titus Howard's about to be a free agent. I think that the Texans really need to probably overpay Titus Howard, but it's worth it for the consistency that you can have as you're building this team. Then maybe 4 years from now, Titus Howard goes and gets paid whatever it is at that time, $30 million a year or something. But right now, it's important enough for that consistency that I think they just got to pull the trigger on that. Texans have more cap space in 2024 than anybody else in America that's playing professional football.
How that works, and they're bought in on it.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
All right, so here's Frank Ross. Who's a favorite of some people on here. There's one thing I want to do here is bear with me, everybody, for a moment, because I'd like to add a banner here. This is the stuff. Landry's really good at this stuff. Landry Locker, you should, guys, if you don't know about the locker room with Landry Locker, you should follow him because he's very consistent with his Texans content and every day. And he also comes up with some really good angles. And he's a coworker of mine at Sports Radio 610. Here we go. Look at this. No? Son of a bitch. Where'd it go? There we go. Special teams coordinator Frank Ross. All right, here we go. Frank Ross is asked a question.
Say it one more time. Anytime. Just name the place. I'm there, man. Let's go. So it's been a good spring so far. OTAs underway, and happy with putting the new guys in to the schemes. A couple things we're working on for spring is obviously the fundamentals, especially in the phase 2 where there's not necessarily a person up across from you, but just working your technique, your footwork, your positioning. But then you also get a chance to work trial of new schemes, and that is really starting to put in now. Don't like that, scrap it, we won't work on that, or double down in training camp, see if that could be applicable to who you're going to try and become, or what new players you can, promote their talents and just, accent those things that we've already kind of used as part of what we think is our kicking game roles here. So it's been a good spring so far. I hope we cap it off the next a few weeks here as we finish out.
All right, sorry, I honestly got a little knocked off track because he came in so strong there. I love special teams coaches. They're so psychotic. He's a new age psychotic though. He doesn't feel like he's, shivved somebody in a back alley or something like some of the special teams coaches I've had in the past. So he talks about the fundamentals, especially in the phase 2 where there's not necessarily a person across from you. I do like, I think it talks a little bit more about it later on, but talking about leverage and spacing and a lot of this stuff, it's kind of like, my wife was a basketball coach, and I know she made the kids work without a basketball the first couple days of like every year. And they hated it and they thought it was the dumbest thing ever. But it's that kind of like teaching you the very fundamentals of where you fit on an offense or defense without getting distracted by the details such as a football or a basketball.
I'm there, man. Let's go. So it's been a good spring so far. OTAs underway, and happy footwork, your positioning. But then you also get a chance to work trial of new or double down in training camp, see if that could be applicable to who you're going to try and become or what new players you can, promote their talents and just, accent those things that we've already kind of used as part of what we think is our kicking game roles here. So it's been a good spring so far. Hopefully we cap it off the next a few weeks here as we finish out.
With Dell and Sims both into the return game now, what do you see in them and how close are they into transitioning?
So with Tank Dell and Steven Sims, how close are they into transitioning to also contributing?
Yeah, obviously we love a laundry list of depth, as returners and just generally speaking, game day ball handling ability. So those two guys both are undersized in stature, got good quickness, ability to track it, set up blocks, cut on the move, and wiggle in space. So like both their skill sets, and we'll see how many other guys can contribute as well, whether that's Grayland. Obviously, Des King has done a great job for us. And, he's such a strong runner, Des specifically. Everybody's play style is a little different. And then, relative to down distance situation, how the roster shakes out when it comes end of preseason down the road here. But we'll look into all those avenues.
I like that he brought up Des King because I think Des King is underappreciated given that he played on a bad team and a bad defense last year. And yet Des King consistently provided usually the hardest hit of a game. I didn't like that a cornerback was consistently giving us the hardest hit of the game. And then I am intrigued by Arthur here, who says he's still boycotting this channel. I don't know why or how I wronged you, Arthur. Perhaps people in the comments know or understand, but let me know because I have no idea who you are or what you're talking about.
From the film where Tank had a lot of long returns, sometimes called back, to you seeing it with the UH Pro Day to now seeing it on the field. What's the commonality you see from all those spaces?
Yeah, there's a God-given athleticism element, of course, where guys know how to just, not spend too much time decelerating or it's just easier for guys to run. And, as a smaller guy, he's got that quickness, that suddenness that hopefully he can translate to when he's out there live with the ball in his hands. So any of those guys who are back there, you're looking to make a play. But, guys, we all know this, the ball is everything. So we put the ball on the ground. I don't know. One is too many in the last couple of years. So the ball can't be on the ground. So whoever's back there handling it, security's number one. Get the ball back for our offense, start a drive, and then anything past the first down is bonus. When we get a chance to take it, we'll try and do that as many times as possible.
Also, by the way, I do also blame Frank Ross for allowing various people to act incredulous that the Texans would fire somebody like David Culley or Lovie Smith, because how could you fire somebody after they win 4 games for you? I mean, the fact of the matter is, part of the reason they were in those games at all was because the special teams has been genuinely good for the Texans. It's been, but no, I mean, nobody cares about that, obviously, but it does help keep you in games. So I blame Frank Ross.
New rules involving kids.
So she's asking about Frank Ross's genuine opinion about the new no kill, climb, no justice, no peace. I have no idea what's going on here, Arthur. Yeah, Arthur, you got to stop it with this nonsense. Explain yourself, damn it. You're knocking me off track here. Jeez. The Kilimanjaro climb. That's right. Okay. All right. He's boycotting me until thank you. Now I remember, Arthur. until I climb Kilimanjaro. I will not. I'll go climb. You know what? I'll go climb some less famous mountain and do it just for you, the followers of this channel, and nobody else. I don't need to be able to put the Kilimanjaro bumper sticker on. As far as Frank Ross goes, I'm glad we got that straightened out. I thought Arthur was just like some genuine whack job. As far as the kickoff rules, being allowed to fair catch a kickoff.
Yeah, I like to compete. I like to play every down we can get. So when we get a chance to cover a kick, let's go out there with our hair on fire. We get a chance to return it. We
hair on fire.
Want those guys to, get shot out of a cannon and go. I got it. I'm 100% in favor of player safety. So anything to elongate the existence of the NFL in our game, great. And player safety. I know a lot of guys make a good living playing on special teams. And I don't want the fabric of the game to change. So hopefully we stay within those parameters. And then whatever's out there, whatever the rules are, doesn't matter what game you're playing. You get 3 points for shooting it from this distance in basketball. Everything else is 2. Free throws are 1. Those are the rules. So we'll play within that scheme. And if that's going to save time, waving a fair catch in end of a half situation, or you got to learn how to squib it and get it through. You got to, judge your yard mark, like what's the average return. That starting field position, you guys know this. That chart doesn't lie. Every yard means percentage up on opportunity to score on the offensive end or defensive side to defend. So we'll play it accordingly. Yeah, I might be like kind of younger, but not really, but still old enough to remember when.
He wants to say it. He wants to say when men were men.
Things were different. So
yeah.
We'll adjust as they come forward. But
he can't though. He knows better. I liked that's like the most entertaining word salad that you could do. That's like if Casario on Adderall or something. I really like Frank Ross. I do think I liked when he said that a lot of guys make a good living playing special teams. I do wonder, it feels like, was he trying to say like, hey man, you're trying to minimize special teams too much and you're going to start taking bread out of people's mouths. And there's family. Think of the children. There are special teamers, children's that need to be fed. I do think we've reached kind of a point where I think everybody's like, all right, listen, it seems for the most part like everybody's informed on concussions. They're trying like crazy, Miami situations notwithstanding, to try to monitor these things and keep guys from going back out. So we've reached kind of an equilibrium on player safety. It is what it is. Can we play football now? If somebody gets injured on special teams, then so be it. It's fun to watch human beings running as fast as they can down the field and trying to murder each other. Like that's part of the damn game. Can we cut it right here and just say like, all right, we've reached a pretty good spot. I feel like we should. Back when men were men.
There's so much that's influential in the game from special teams, but it's also a developmental spot for the team as a whole. So like with that and potential changes, like how do you first describe the importance of that for a team, but where does that go?
So
you said the word developmental.
Brooks is talking about like there's a lot of developmental aspects to special teams, and I guess how do you address that? I guess I might ask, like how do you account for that, or replace that if you lose some of it with losing kickoffs and whatnot.
And in football, you got to have angular space, awareness. They used to say head on a swivel before, that way you don't get ear holed and cracked, right? So.
See, there's that. I used to say head on a swivel, but we're not allowed. It's insensitive to swivels to use that phrase anymore.
Just feeling space, playing off of your teammate, and feeling the block leverage, fighting pressure with pressure, running, blocking, tackling, holding onto the football, entry angles. That's just football. And, so there's an element of the game that's going to be not compromised, but I would just say, hey, it's a new element. We've got to, adjust a little bit. And it might be a little bit more schematically and situational more than anything. But we'll see. And, I got to have all the parameters. The rule was tabled and then just changed kind of recently, still tinkering potentially with the amount of players in the setup zone on an onside kick. So, or whatever the case may be. By the time we get back, hopefully we have that black and white and we'll be ready to play it out accordingly. But
I'll tell you, it's true. Like my welcome to the NFL moment, or one of them mostly, was I had to run down on kick. I had to run on kickoff. I weighed 305 pounds running down on kickoff my rookie year. But man, I hadn't really done kickoff since my freshman or sophomore year in college. And the level of complexity with some of those returns, and then obviously the speed of the guys doing it, it was kind of overwhelming. Like it felt like you were starting off a video game on level 10, where you're just like, what the hell is shooting at me? And where's this guy coming from? So those guys, especially linebackers, defensive backs, like they learn a lot about the really hard aspects of the game playing on special teams. And, obviously they don't get as much as they used to.
Yeah.
Still got to play the games.
Foundationally, developmentally, it's an important piece. So hopefully it's staying, in the game.
Frank, you gave the corporate.
Go ahead.
Frank, you gave the corporate answer about the new rule change. Now tell us how you really feel.
So you say you gave a very corporate answer about the new rule change. Now tell us how you really feel.
You like the corporate answer? Yeah. Just keep playing football, man. Let's keep playing football. Let's keep football tough. How about that?
You looked off to the PR person. Under the PR person, if it was Omar or somebody, I wonder if they got nervous. Like, don't do it, Frank. Don't get canceled here. Don't get fined, because we're gonna have to. Then we gotta. We just don't want any more bad news.
On the special team drill, Amari Rogers was making his way back to return some kicks, and I think he told him, "This you're not supposed to be back there." And he said, "No, coach, I want to be back there." And he went there anyway. Then you said that you needed 2 extra players, and you had 2 veterans, willing, in full sprint, trying to get over there to help out. When you see that type of excitement and those players that are willing to do those type of things, what does that make you feel?
So I think that was Sarge telling a story about Amari Rogers volunteering on special teams, insisting upon it, and playing it. And so in the transcripts, it says, on players' excitement and willingness to help out on special teams.
Yeah, obviously everybody wants to be out there, and guys working in certain drills, and not just relative to load management or whatever the case may be. But obviously, hopefully the culture is, man, anytime you're in a line for receiver drills, I want to be at the front of the line, or a line for running back drills, I want to be at the front of the line. So hopefully that's the same in the kicking game, and just guys are hungry to get any single rep they can. And at our level, honestly, Sarge, it's just basically like saying, you can't run kickoff after kickoff after kickoff, or you can't, it's too taxing. And guys want those reps at high effort. So when we do the drill work, you want guys to get good quality reps, and for people willing to step up if we're short on a number count or something like that, that's great. And just showing that, hey, look, we got these important and valuable reps. Might be an OTA day, but we got to get that rep in, and hopefully everybody has that kind of mentality.
Let's do 2 more. All set?
Set.
All right.
Thank you.
See you guys later.
So the exit stage right. He does the Collinsworth slide in reverse. So next up will be Matt Burke, I believe. Okay, so Matt Burke. So some of you guys watching and seeing the discussions about various mountains to climb, that's based on Matt Burke having been a world traveler, done a bunch of different stuff. I think when he climbed Kilimanjaro, it was part of a trip where he also said he had, I think they were doing some relief work. Oh, it was one of the players that he played for was building a church or something in Africa. And afterwards he went and, let me write this banner up here. Defensive coordinator, Matt Burke. Thank you. Spell check. They went and climbed Kilimanjaro and ate brunch with the gorillas and everything. And oh, by the way, I'm watching a thing on chimpanzees on Netflix. Oh my God. It's brutal. It'll make you want to climb the corporate ladder, though. It'll make you do whatever it takes to get ahead, because these chimpanzees have a very advanced hierarchy and social structure. And the alpha male, if you're not a chimpanzee alpha male, then I got no respect for you. If you're not willing to murder to get to the top, you're not in the same business as me. Here's Matt Burke, defensive coordinator.
Oh, right into it, huh? Man, I wasn't ready. Let's go.
I think when you got Will Anderson Jr., how do you see him fitting into your team?
Obviously excited to add another piece to the defense. Obviously through the evaluation
So he was asked about getting Will Anderson.
process, we spent a lot of time with Will. had him in the building, got to know him obviously as a young man and what sort of he brought to the table from that point of view. So very excited to just add another element to the defense, and he's done a really good job so far, just working, again, asking him to play some techniques or some positions maybe that he hasn't done in a year or two, and just trying to get him kind of up to speed on that. So it's been really good.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too when I guess the word position can mean a lot of different things, and there's been talk about a Will Anderson position change, and then DeMeco or somebody else saying, well, it's not a position change. A lot of it is just the different techniques that they're using, where they're going to have Will Anderson line up just cocked out wide in a 3-point stance, trying to get into the backfield as fast as possible. So it's not much different alignment wise as any other defensive end or outside linebacker or things that he's done. But it is like the responsibilities, the technique, some of that stuff is just different enough that he's got to just be sure he's got the focused mindset, and it's all going to be very good and easy for him. I think in a lot of ways, Will Anderson is going to realize like, oh, wow, this is simpler in the NFL just because they're not going to ask me to do as much. He's not going to have to go down and play interior defensive line hardly ever, except like on 3rd and 15, I think. But that's different. That's just fun. So I think some of the talk of position change is overblown, but just understand that the coaches themselves are talking about position changes, so it's understandable. I feel like I just made that way more confusing than it needs to be.
DeMeco Ryans call defensive plays?
Yes.
You will?
You said, well, me or DeMeco?
Oh, I hadn't seen this. Okay, he was asked whether DeMeco Ryans or Matt Burke would be calling defensive plays, and he said yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Right now, like, we're just going through this process in the spring. I'm handling it right now, but obviously we'll kind of let you know after the first game. How's that?
Okay, so as some of you know, I'm reading this book called 48 Laws of Power, which is just an awful, awful, awful book. It's basically like a modern day what was the Medicis, the Machiavelli type stuff. It's like all these different rules, but whereby various little fingers get ahead by manipulating, deceiving, doing all of these awful mind and head games. But it's interesting to read because it tells a lot of good historical stories. If DeMeco were to follow the 48 Laws of Power, this is what he would do. He would say, we're not gonna have a defensive coordinator. And it's going to be a committee effort. And then as soon as the defense does really well, be sure he takes all the credit. And as soon as the defense does poorly, fire Matt Burke's ass. That's the 48 Laws of Power way to do it. The Prince was, thank you, Bubba. The Prince was the name of the movie about the Medicis by Machiavelli, right? But like the 48 Laws of Power is a new one. The one cautionary tale I would give to young adults, it feels like 25-year-old men might be most susceptible to this book. The tactics described are very effective for getting ahead in life if you want to be a paranoid monster that nobody truly loves and that might end up in jail someday. So like, just be very careful in whether you choose to go down that dark path or not of employing these incredibly antisocial techniques. There are people who achieve great success with it, but it's at what price? That's my answer. Back to football.
You gonna stop asking? Yes, sir.
As far as whether which one of those guys is going to call plays. Some teams will do it on a situational basis. Matt Burke might be responsible for red zone play calling. DeMeco might handle 3rd down, and obviously DeMeco has executive power over everything. But I do think it's going to be one of those things that won't be annoying unless they're struggling, and then it will be all we care about.
Dynamic between you and DeMeco and the coordinator who's used to calling plays. How we all work on the field, in the meetings, game days. What do you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, obviously right now we're working through that process from the off season. Again, I just keep reiterating, like, it's invaluable for me to have him around, and it's been really collaborative. Again, just having sort of been in similar schemes, but kind of bringing them together. Obviously out there, like, I don't know, you guys were out there a little bit today, like, just being able to kind of lean on him for me too, like, just, in between periods, style.
Oh, sorry. In case you couldn't hear the question, it was John McClain asking about working with DeMeco Ryans.
To him and talk to him about what he saw or some things that I saw or things I'd like to change. So it's been awesome for me to have that resource as we go through this sort of installation and sort of growth period here. So, man, it's been cool. Just again, I didn't have a lot of personal history with DeMeco, so just like building that relationship as we've gone through this, and obviously spending some long hours in the office trying to get up to speed. It's been really cool. So I've really enjoyed it. It's been a collaborative process so far. So hopefully we just kind of keep that going.
Yeah, I think that like if there's one thing I've sensed from DeMeco putting together this staff, and he kept a lot of guys too, right? 8, 9 guys that are still on the staff. So, he hasn't worked with everybody, and I do like that. And I think that was something that sometimes it's an advantage in hiring a coach who's relatively young, or if you do hire a college coach and make it the right choice, they don't necessarily have like a lot of backs to scratch. You know, they're not in the buddy system of, you know, needing to show loyalty to somebody that he was with here, made a promise to there. And they can just kind of go out and pick guys that they hear a good word of mouth about or that they seem philosophically aligned with. And I think that's what it seems like with Matt Burke. So I think that DeMeco and he'll get along, because a lot of these guys don't really, the point I was going to make is they don't seem like they have a lot of ego, you know, and not in not overly humble or trying to, you know, affect a certain type of image or anything. They just seem like they're genuine football nerds and kind of into it. Like DeMeco, like obviously, like I say football nerd in a very complimentary way. Some of the biggest football nerds I know were genuine psychopaths off the field. So it's not like it's they're saying they're a wimp or anything, but they're nerds for football. They just they love learning about it, learning different ways to do it, all that stuff. And I get that sense from these guys, and it makes me feel good. Feels like they're more concerned with football than propping up their own egos or beating their own chests.
You got a chance to watch Derek Stingley Jr. play some last year as far as on film is concerned. This year when you're watching him out in practice in his mini camps, he's added on some weight. Have you seen any difference in his fluidity, his hip movement?
No. I mean, I haven't, and you know, I'll be honest with you.
Asked about Derek Stingley, who looks a lot bigger. Have you noticed any difference in his fluidity or hip movement? It's a very sexual question.
I don't really look at the weight stuff much right now. I mean, a lot of those guys are, you know, heavy or fluctuating or working into it. That's part of what this offseason program is. Sting's been able to do everything we've asked him to do. Again, another sort of position where we're playing some different coverages and some different techniques than he played last year, and he's been good fitting into that stuff. So now I'm happy where he is, where he's been working.
You know, it's funny, in mini camps and OTAs, the weight change stuff is sometimes scary because I've told you guys before, OTAs and mini camps lie. Like they lie to coaches and they lie to yourself if you're a player, because you can get away with carrying like an extra 15 pounds in minicamp and feeling like, oh yeah, I'm strong as hell. I'm as fast as I've ever been. And then you forget that you're really only practicing in no pads for 90 minutes at a shot, you know, 2 or 3 times a week. You carry that same weight into training camp in August, and you're trying to play 60 snaps in a game in September. It's different. It's just different. So you got to kind of feel it out and be honest with yourself. And then likewise with coaches, sometimes the guys who are athletes, pure athletes, have an edge in minicamp because you take the physical element of the game out of it. And sometimes you'll see guys kind of become coaches' darlings during OTAs. And then, especially back in the old days, as Frank Ross might tell you, once the pads go on, all of a sudden some of those gazelles start to lose their luster. So Matt Burke not caring too much about the weight right now is the appropriate attitude. As long as Stingley's not fat or something, which he's not. He just looks beefy.
What your scheme is like, because a lot of fans are just now starting to pay attention.
Oh yeah.
Steph Stradley wants to know, on behalf of the fans, what is his scheme like?
Hopefully they keep paying attention. That'd be cool. Yeah. So again, we're going to base out of a 4 down front. And I would just say, if you wanted to do the whole pick one word, it'd be attack. We play our defensive line in a penetrating style, try to edge them up, play 9 techniques, those sort of things to cause disruption. So our goal is to be able to affect plays with our front by the style of they play, the attack mode that they play in, and penetrate and disruption and reset the line of scrimmage and those sort of things. So I would say if you just wanted to like bottle it up, that would be like the main thing. And again, the more that you can pressure a quarterback with 4 and not have to commit other resources to doing that, that helps kind of protect your coverage a little bit, so you can play multiple coverages and change that element up, if you can affect the quarterback in the offense with your front. So that's kind of the general approach and philosophy that I'd say we're taking.
A couple of themes there, because I think as soon as you start hearing that attacking front, you think, okay, well, like Lovie Smith's defense was an attacking front, and they didn't sack the quarterback a lot, and the coverage behind them wasn't good enough to really necessarily take advantage of it. But they were given, if you lower the bar enough, I felt like they were effective at getting to the quarterback given expectations. But the big problem with a philosophy like that sometimes is that you sacrifice a lot in the run game. The big difference between the way DeMeco Ryans wants to do it, I think, is in the types of athletes that you have. So if you think about the Colts back before they became Super Bowl ready Colts, they had a lot of 235-pound defensive linemen. They had guys that were pure pass rushers, and it ended up getting them gashed in the run, or they couldn't get stops when they really needed them. In the fourth quarter, in December or January versus really good teams, it was really hard to get those stops when you needed them because you're just built to be a race car. So what happened over time was you don't have to necessarily change your scheme. You got to change your personnel. You can still have that same aggressive front, but you got to have guys who are ass kickers, both in mentality, but also body size. So instead of Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis, you get guys like Nick Bosa, who's a beefier. And I know Nick Bosa isn't that heavy, but he's a beefier dude that is a badass versus the run as well as the pass. And you can still have that mentality of getting upfield really quickly, but still playing the run, so you don't end up having one of the league's worst run defenses. And I think that's where DeMeco and Matt Burke are with this. If you look at Will Anderson is smaller, yes. Does he end up playing at – I don't know if he ends up playing at 260 or so. I don't know if he can carry that. But he's very stout versus the run. I thought his size actually hurt him as a pass rusher more than it hurt him as a run stuffer, because he gets super low, uses his hands well, stands up a lot of really big offensive linemen when he's playing the run. It's in the pass game where sometimes – if his first power move didn't work, he kind of got stuck. That's what he's gonna have to work on there. But I think the personnel over time that they take in is going to be what keeps them from being softies versus the run. So I'm getting on edges, lining up in wide nines. That's just where you're cocked out wide in an angle. That stuff's good. That's going to be fun. That's going to be aggressive.
When you were in Arizona, you got to play with Buda Baker and was interchange chess. Two safeties here. Have seen reps whether in college or at the professional level, the nickel, money backer, free safety, strong safety.
Sure.
What does that do for you defensively to get certain alignments that make you advantage?
Yeah.
So he's asking about safeties that are able to play multiple positions. I think that wasn't in the transcripts.
Absolutely. I mean, I think obviously both those guys, and I would just say in general in the league, I think there's a trend towards more multidimensional players because they're going to be put in different spots, and because offenses have running backs that can do a lot of different things and tight ends that can flex out and do all sorts of stuff. So to have the ability to have some safeties that can match up with those different type of body types or different type of weapons on offense, and then from a disguise standpoint where we don't have to flip certain guys or match corners over or do some of those things, that if this progresses, that we can kind of keep those guys, if we feel comfortable enough, say Jimmy and Jalen and guys like that, being able to just sort of match up whatever comes to their side. That's a nice piece for us, because we can start just sort of hopefully using our looks all sort of stay the same. We're not giving away certain things by having guys travel. So, again, those guys are working through everything we're asking them to do. It's been great. That's a good room. And but yeah, that'll be hopefully a nice piece for us.
So to make that real simple, the way the cat and mouse game has gone with offenses and defenses over the past few years is And not all of this is brand new. It's just there's trends. But, when an offense sends somebody in motion, a lot of times the biggest thing you're trying to do is just figure out what defense are they in. Okay, this receiver goes in motion and the guy follows him across the field, then they're in man and he's manned up on him. If you've got versatility in your secondary, instead of you can stay in man, you're just swapping out who's on that guy. And if you've got really savvy guys, you can maybe cheat a little and make a little dummy movements to really make the quarterback think that you're in man. Then you come down and rob them. And or make them think you're in zone and vice versa, all that stuff. So defenses have gotten better at that part of it. Or sometimes they'll make it look like a guy is manned up, but they're actually switching out to a zone. Like all that stuff you can do if you've got guys like Jimmy Ward and Jalen Petrie. It's a lot harder to do if you got sticks in the mud out there that are A, not athletic enough, and B, kind of dumb. And you can populate your brain with whichever player from the Texans past that I'm thinking of, but you wouldn't be able to do a lot of the stuff they want to do this year with certain players from the past just because they weren't mentally able to do the things that Petrie and Jimmy Ward can do.
Can you talk about your first impressions of Jalen Petrie up to this point?
Speak of the devil, first impressions of Jalen Petrie.
Yeah. I don't know, whatever superlative you want. I mean, great. Yeah, no, I'm saying he's great. I mean, he's just, doesn't say much like in the meeting rooms and stuff from like that point of view, but man is like super communicative on the field. And I would just say, DeMeco has a team meeting pretty much every morning, kind of recapping some of the stuff that happened from the day before. And I would say Jalen's sort of finishing and effort shows up on that tape probably as much as anybody. I'm not going to discount anybody else, but just the way he approaches like finishing every play in practice, like being in a good football position, again, as a deep safety, sometimes runs in practice kind of squirt through. We want our offensive guys finishing downfield, but Jalen's always there, like getting to a hip, finishing a good position. Like, so just to see him train those habits consistently like that is just really cool. I mean, I think that's what, you guys saw obviously on the field last year of just like the fruits of those labors. Like he practices with intent, and he's very deliberate in everything he does. So I think that's what kind of translates.
Practicing with intent. That's another buzzword we're hearing a lot, with intent. I'm into that. I like it. Yes, I understand there's probably a biblical basis to it. Then you can tell me about it afterwards. You guys, nobody complimented me on my biblical reference that I made the other day. I can't remember what it was. I had obviously just looked it up beforehand. It wasn't like I did it from memory or anything. But with intent, that's a big thing. As far as Jalen Petrie, I think that my most encouraging thing for Jalen Petrie last year was that he was never one bit defensive at all about his missed tackles. Man, it's just so common nowadays where a guy might get a rookie of the week honor or something and then tweet out like, oh, I thought I missed too many tackles, huh? And he didn't do that. Like he was the first to point out that, yeah, he's got to get better and more secure in a lot of his missed tackles, even though some of them, they're always going to be your fault when you miss a tackle, but the degree of difficulty was higher because the front seven was not playing well. And because a lot of times, like when you're Jalen Petrie trying to take on Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry hasn't been slowed down one bit by the first or second wave of the defense, that's a high degree of difficulty. It's hard. It's like you're trying the triple Lindy, with a sprained ankle or something. It's going to be hard to pull that off. So I do feel very good about, given everything Matt Burke just said. Matt Burke's talking about a second-year player, kind of gushing about a lot of the intangibles in a way that you don't hear guys talk about young players a lot. So that's very good to hear.
You mentioned that Stingley is going to work through a lot of multiple coverages.
Mm-hmm.
What about his play allows you to do other things with the rest of the defense? How does he equip you?
Yeah, I mean, he's just obviously.
So what about Derek Stingley's play allows you to work through multiple coverages? There we go. Just like to see who's going to stick with me through the hard times when I mess up
like just being able to kind of lean on him for me too, like just.
That's DeMeco.
To have the ability to have some safeties that can.
Safeties.
Can you talk about your first impressions of Jalen Petrie up to this point?
Jalen Petrie.
the fruits of those labors. Like, he practices with intent, and he's very deliberate in everything he does. So I think that's what kind of translates.
You mentioned that Stingley is going to work through a lot of multiple coverages.
Mm-hmm.
What about his play allows you to do other things with the rest of the defense? How does he equip you?
Yeah, I mean, he's just obviously, hopefully he's a corner that we feel good about in whatever coverage matchups that we get to. Again, whether we get to points where we feel good about isolating him or not, like, that's obviously stuff down the road that we'll get to. Right now, we're just kind of playing our base techniques and trying to get him right. So we haven't really got into matching guys or flipping dudes or any of that type of thing. So, hopefully, again, we're just asking Sting to keep progressing and getting better at what we're asking him to do right now. And then I think those types of decisions are more made as we get closer to things.
I guess, you know what, if I'm going to read into anything, and yeah, Mike White, I was saying Mike White might have a really good chance this year if he's playing, if Tua Tagovailoa gets injured in Miami. And Mike White, who people up in New York just absolutely loved, except that he was a little too willing to stand in and take punishment, much like Tua. So he might have Mike White might be a sleeper Pro Bowler or something this year, thrown to those receivers. But as far as Derek Stingley, okay, if I'm going to read into this a little too much, man, Matt Burke has gushed and gushed and gushed about Jalen Petrie and hasn't been as effusive in the praise about Derek Stingley. So if you're gonna be the type who reads too much into things, let's keep an eye on this situation.
Yeah, how much did it help to have Warren? How much did it help to have Warren knowing his defense so well?
Oh, okay. How much has it helped having Jimmy Ward, the safety, knowing this defense so well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think very good. I mean, he's been great in that room with a guy like Jalen, obviously working with him. Oh, it's okay. It's fine. That's okay. I forgive you.
There's a cell phone going on.
Okay, cool. Like I said, like working with Jalen and like kind of helping that growth along the whole back end. It's great. I mean, obviously, just a lot of the guys or some of the guys that we targeted to bring in from Jimmy and, some of the guys in D-line that have a history in the system and familiarity, like it just helps almost like just keep the messaging going, obviously in the locker room and those sort of things. And Jimmy's been great, and he looks like he's about 25 right now out there, so that's been cool too.
Jimmy Ward, man, we had some good audio of him describing his fight with DeAndre Hopkins during training camp in the combined practice a few years ago. And I got to say, I like Jimmy Ward a lot. I feel like his description of what happened was inaccurate. I should probably do a video on that with like showing different aspects or different storytellings about the fight between Jimmy Ward and DeAndre Hopkins, because Deshaun Watson threw the ball to DeAndre Hopkins out in the flat. Jimmy Ward, you could tell by the time the camera got to it, DeAndre's helmet was off. So like Jimmy Ward had just said, I jammed him. It was like I had jammed him. Well, okay, his helmet came. I don't know why DeAndre's helmet was off, but DeAndre basically was like, all right, I caught the ball. The drill is done because my helmet's off. Jimmy Ward then punched at the ball like after DeAndre had taken himself out of the drill, and that's when DeAndre got PO'd. So I do currently love Jimmy Ward because he is a Texan and I like his spirit. But I got to side with DeAndre in that one little exchange. If DeAndre, as per reports, is very interested in coming back to Houston, per Roosh Williams' report, then we'll have to. Those two, I'm sure, will be fine. Guys get in fights at training camp all the time. It's usually not that big a deal unless one guy's super sensitive about it. It's not that's not going to be the barrier to a DeAndre Hopkins deal getting done. A reasonable price would be the biggest barrier. You can't bring DeAndre in like trying to break the bank on him or anything. It's got to be at the right price with the right motivation.
Last two guys. I know it's very, very early in the process.
It is.
From a defensive standpoint, what have you seen on the offensive side of the ball?
Oh man, that's it. Isn't Bobby coming in here next?
Well, I'm saying from
Thank you. I am.
So he said, "What have we seen? What have you seen from the offensive side of the ball?"
I'll tell you one story. Honestly, we did a 2-minute drive at the end of practice sometime last week, and he threw into a kind of a coverage we hadn't shown. It was the first day we put the coverage in, and he threw in. Kind of probably wasn't a throw he probably wanted back. I'll just say it that way. But the first thing he did when I was walking off the field, he grabbed me. He said, "Yeah, literally, Coach Burke." And he spent about 10 minutes walking in off the field asking me about the coverage and just sort of what he saw and how we kind of set it up and talk through that. So I think just, again, his his deliberateness and intent to try to get better, and like he's literally grabbing everybody he can in the field. I like all those guys, Davis and Case and those guys. Like during stretch lines, I kind of go hang out and talk to them a little bit about some of the stuff we're doing in the periods and just try to get that back and forth. And so he's been very sort of intentional of learning and just learning defense too. Like, hey, what'd you call there? What was that coverage, or what'd you do here? So I respect that from him.
There's something about that it reminded me of this book I read a couple years ago, last year. It's called The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. Who he was the kid who was the subject of the movie Chasing Bobby Fischer. He was this chess prodigy who ended up getting burned out on chess and then became like a Taekwondo world champion after that. But he wrote this book called The Art of Learning, which is interesting because he talks about chess masters and how a lot of times what people classify as inspiration or these moments, these flashes of genius, to the chess master really are just that they've just gone through these scenarios in their brains so many times that what looks like a leap of inspiration to almost anybody except a grand champion or whatever it's called when you're at the highest level, it looks like impossible that they could have come to the same conclusion, when in reality, it's just that they've just thought about chess way more. And with a lot of the great quarterbacks, I think as they get older, they describe kind of a similar scenario where don't get me wrong, it's like super smart and impressive. Don't get me wrong at all. I'm not saying these guys are dullards who just work hard. But they study these situations so often that they have these flashes and they can recall to like, 5 years ago, we saw this when we were playing Indianapolis and this is how we handled it then. They've just got this incredible tool bag of scenarios. And I think that's what's cool to hear. Like when you hear CJ Stroud trying to sort this stuff out, it's like getting those reps in and getting like, okay, I got burned by this. How do I know how to recognize this? What are they thinking? What are they exploiting? How do I be sure this never happens again? And like the faster you get started on it and the more you do it and you recognize and understand that is the challenge, that's a big deal, because some of these guys don't understand that that's the challenge until like their fourth or fifth year in the league. So that chip on the shoulder that motivates CJ Stroud, I think he uses it in all the right ways.
Yep.
Working with DeMeco is new for you guys, but how has he organized teaching, like organizing what you're going to teach and then bringing it to the players? Like how, in the spots that you've been, how have you seen how you guys have approached that?
Yeah, I would say, I would say probably, he's a very like sort of like specific to big. So in phase one, we actually started phase one with a lot of almost individualized. We took every player and said, hey, this is what you can improve just as an individual, a technique or something in your game that you can improve, to work on through this first phase. And then when we got into sort of the second half of that in phase two, it was very much like techniques. Like we didn't really even get to big picture coverage stuff. We were like, everyone's going to learn this technique. This guy, then we're going to learn this technique. We're going to kind of do these drills. And so we went from like very specific to like kind of group settings to now like obviously team settings and putting it all together where like hopefully the foundation of like you're playing this technique in this coverage. So it's not necessarily knowing the whole coverage. I mean, they do know the whole coverage, but like you've learned it from this technique up essentially. So you kind of always have that foundation. So he's really good. It's been cool. Like he's done a really good job of like wanting to build a foundational aspect to what we do and understand the whys and sort of the intricacies. And we had that time coming through phase one and phase two to now it's like, all right, we're all together. We're calling the whole coverage, but within it, those elements, that technique you've practiced since day one, and we talked about that technique, and you're doing this, and here's how it all meshes together. So we kind of went from specific to sort of big picture, and it's been a cool like process, I think, for those guys to go through.
I think that part, see again, and we talked about this earlier with Bobby Slowik and the offense. The fact that there is just a system that he has in place for teaching these things. I think a lot of times, like when you're learning sports or anything else, sometimes it feels like, and I know I felt like this in the NFL more than anywhere else, was like I always felt kind of lost as to like exactly what technique what was the best way of doing things. Like, there's one coach back in the day wanted me to do it this way. This guy isn't even really telling me what way to do it. And it's stressful when you don't actually necessarily even know exactly how to fix a problem or what's expected of you. There are way more miscommunications than there should be. And I think that starting from the ground up like that, and very much starting small and working up bigger, it's just a really cool way to kind of be sure everybody's on the right track and everybody's on the same page and in the same mindset. And it's not something that you necessarily see a lot of coaches think about or have a plan for. And it's very much it's more than just a cliche talking about how coaching is teaching or something like that. Like, okay, well, if I'm going to teach a class, then I'm going to have a lesson plan. And it's more than just, telling the kids they better know the story of the War of 1812 because there's a test on it next week. And you better produce in that test or you're out of here, buddy. Figure it out. I think they're much more systematic than that. So I like that. Somebody earlier had asked whether I had seen the interview that CJ Stroud did with Matt Berry. The answer is yes, I have seen that. The big question, though, is do I have it saved on my computer? Because I thought I did. I've got Josh Allen highlights. That's not what I wanted. Bobby Slowik cuts and sound. Oh, you know what? I've got it in my So the other day we saw clips of CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson having a meeting with Tom Brady and Travis. Hold on a second. Travis Scott. I'm going to find this video here. Let's see. I want to open for you. Open project file, share. So anyway, at that rookie event, CJ Stroud ended up doing a thing where he talked to me, and multitasking is not the prettiest thing in the world. He ended up talking to Matthew Berry. Matthew Berry had a few questions for him. I thought he said some really cool things in it. So we'll pull that up. While I wait for that to process, I'll take a couple of these questions. Seth, reports coming out about Hopkins interested in signing with the Texans. What's your take? I think that Roosh Williams had that report, and Roosh Williams, a very trustworthy fellow that usually covers the Rockets. This reminds me of a couple years ago when Adam Schefter broke NBA news. I'm pretty sure just because I think Woj just fed it to him just to kind of have some fun during NBA free agency, which was in like Christmas time that year. It was the COVID year. So I think that it would have to be at the right price. I think that the biggest issue I have with DeAndre Hopkins right now, even at the right price, is that, look, Hopkins does his best work these days from the slot. He's not an outside X receiver. If he does line up outside, it's still best if you can use him in traffic, with formations and things like that, or just use him from the slot. I believe last year he spent more time in the slot than he had at any point in the NFL. In the Texans, the last year here, he was in the slot a lot. The Texans have two guys in Tank Dell and John Mechie that were really interested in seeing work in the slot. So I guess I don't know how many reps that leaves for those guys as you're trying to figure out exactly which of those guys you really like. Can you keep both of them around? And for where the Texans are developmentally right now, I don't think that the immediate shot in the arm that you get from DeAndre Hopkins isn't necessarily worth the money or the lost reps that you get from those young guys. I think Robert Woods likely is not as good as a receiver as DeAndre Hopkins still is. But you have that veteran guy on your team that, by the way, like Robert Woods was his first year in with McVay with the Rams was Jared Goff's second year in the league. So, and those guys were both with McVay in McVay's first year. So Robert Woods has seen a young rookie quarterback make that transition to doing a Kubshanistan offense. And I feel good about that. I wouldn't hate it. Like if they decided that what they wanted was DeAndre Hopkins, I would love to see him back here. I would get super stoked about it. But I just don't think, if I'm being prudent, in a year in which I've I've cheered on my team, like trading a king's ransom for a non-quarterback to get in Will Anderson, and I'm gung-ho about that. You can't start making too many exceptions to whatever your plan is. Like you can't be the team that's swinging for the fences all the time. It feels like if you were going to pay DeAndre Hopkins what he's hoping to get, or what he's likely hoping to get, that would be a little bit like swinging for the fences before you're ready. Really, it's swinging for the fences in 2013 Astros. Okay, great. Should they have signed some free agent that could help him hit a whole bunch of home runs in 2013? That would have been money poorly spent, I think. I hope Hopkins signs with a team soon so we can stop talking about him coming to the Texans. It's not going to happen. Bury the horse, damn it. Yeah, I'm skeptical that it would happen. I think that DeAndre is probably – that's still processing. I think DeAndre too, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, I think a lot of people were taking his various podcast interviews a little too seriously and thinking that there was a specific list of teams that DeAndre wanted to go to. I think that right now he might be trying to get that message out that like, hey, whoa, listen, I'm open for business. I would love to play various places. Please don't feel like you can't pursue me because I only want to play for like these 5 quarterbacks or something. I do think also though too that like him coming out with a list of quarterbacks that he would want to play for, which he didn't come out with. He was asked a specific question, which 5 guys other than Kyler Murray would you want to play for? And he named guys that didn't come off the top of his head really quickly or anything, but he did it. That's the kind of disruptive things that teams might not want out of their veteran player, especially a team like the Texans that just watched their veteran leader, Brandon Cooks, force his way off the team because he had the SADs. He had the cold pricklies. So I don't know about that. Also, Terry Kendrick says, can't trust the guy that uses the juice. He's going to be 31. He had a PED suspension last year. The year before that, he was injured. There is a part of me that wonders, all right, like, what was the PED suspension? Maybe it is a genuine case of taking a dumb moment of taking the wrong supplement or something. Or like, is his body, after all those years where he played through a lot of injuries, is he banged up? Is he like at that point where he's going to hit that steep slide? I don't know. Let's see if we got this now. Let's see, DeMeco for YouTube. I think my computer has gotten slow lately. After used to be, I've probably got memory I got to clean up or something. Let's see. We'll take some more questions. Tiff said, yeah, this is coming up in this Matthew Berry interview. This would be the big hook, except Matt Berry didn't even realize it or hear it at the time. CJ said he can't run like Michael Vick, but Vick can't throw like CJ, which I think is fair when it comes to just accuracy and touch and all of that. CJ Stroud told Matthew Berry that he thought the Texans would draft him and JSN at 12. I can't remember. We'll find out in a moment whether he said he thought that they would draft Jackson Smith and Jigba or whether he hoped they would draft Jackson Smith and Jigba, his running mate from Ohio State. But he addressed it. He also addressed the story. Matthew Berry framed it as like, hey, the story is that you told the Texans you really wanted Tank Dell, so they went out and drafted Tank Dell. And I feel like CJ puts a little bit better context on it. Seth, which Texans QB you played with is your personal favorite? Okay, that's a tough one because I only played with David Carr. I think David was healthy the entire time that I was there. So as far as backups go, boy, that's a tough one. Like I liked Sage. I had good conversations with Sage. I like Tony Banks. Tony Banks, I always felt like Tony Banks was kind of like an old soul, a little bit wise beyond his years. And I always felt a little bit inferior talking to Tony Banks, not like in an insecure way or anything, but just in a like, in a way in which I felt like he was just more mature than me. That I feel like, okay, Tony Banks and I are about the same age. I feel like I should be as mature as Tony Banks, and yet I'm not nearly as mature as Tony Banks. There's another couple. Who's the guy the first year? Is it Kent Graham? Why am I thinking Kent something? I can't think of his name even. One of the I will go if we're gonna go with the like guys that I respected the most, as I told you, I respected Tony Banks a lot. And this kind of like with CJ, kind of like with DeAndre Hopkins. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, so this isn't an official power rankings. The first guy that leaps to mind is Mark Bruner. Like there's a reason there's an award named after Mark Bruner. It's because he was just one of the most genuinely solid dudes you'd ever meet. And when I played in Jacksonville and we were in the old AFC Central, you guys remember, we played the Steelers a lot, and when I came into the league, the Steelers and the Jaguars were the two toughest teams in that division, and they had this guy Mark Bruner, who was an old school blocking tight end. And I remember watching Mark Bruner on film and thinking, like, this guy must be off like down on the docks fighting sailors on the weekend, or like in some kind of fight club or something. Like, this guy is a badass. And that's just kind of what I thought of him, because he was always like blocking people 20 yards downfield. He's built real solid. And then I was kind of shocked the first time I met him in Houston when he signed as a free agent. He came up to me and he was like, "Hey, Seth, nice to meet you. Golly, what's so what's going on the team these days?" Like, he's the nicest guy on earth. He's super, super nice. So like, he blended that. He was that balance between being like a Ned Flanders type almost, and yet also like a incredible badass on the field. We need a bloody-faced white guy with a high motor on this team. Is Big Heine going to make this team? But that's a good question, because Big Heine does not necessarily fit the mold of like a guy who gets up the field really quickly and penetrates. And yet I think he could be the guy that, is a good enough like hybrid player, maybe beefs up and is more of a run stuffer. But I don't know. He's going to have a battle on his hands, depending on what some of these others guys do. Just got on, so if you have answered this, what is a realistic expectation for CJ? Also, the Texans as a whole. Okay. Couple things going. Is one, I think it's going to be a pretty weak division. Now, Anthony Richardson has the capacity to be a rookie phenom, and that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be an awesome quarterback in the NFL. He's playing with a head coach who's been very good at utilizing the athleticism of young and raw quarterbacks. So, and I'm speaking specifically of Jalen Hurts. I would say Justin Herbert too. Like, Shane was the offensive coordinator in San Diego, or with the Chargers, when Herbert won Rookie of the Year. Like, and Herbert's, athletic enough, but like, he got a lot more out of Herbert than people expected. And then obviously Jalen Hurts, he helped develop Jalen Hurts, but then also really utilized his legs to the maximum. They're going to be running that mush push quarterback sneak that I think everybody should be running this year. They didn't outlaw it. But having said all of that, I think that Stroud throwing for like close to 4,000 yards and not throwing for that many interceptions would be a really good start. If he could limit the interceptions, and like by rookie standards, if he could keep better than a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, I'd be really excited about that. I think Stroud is a guy that is very conscientious. He wants to learn and do things the right way and doesn't want to take shortcuts. Sometimes with guys like that, the curve is a little bit shallower at the beginning of things, because it's like, the analogy I always use is like when you're learning how to type, if you're doing it the right way and you're not hunting and pecking, you're going to be slower than the guys that are just looking at I'm thinking specifically of my friend from high school, Aaron Lefebvre, who smoked me our first week of typing class because he was just hunting and pecking and hunting and pecking. And I was trying to do it the right way because I was a nerd. And, by week 4, week 5 of typing class, I left Aaron Lefebvre in the dust, which was still ultimately is nothing that he cared about one bit. But, like, I'm a competitor, man. I don't care if it's typing, blood sport, or anything else. I'm going to try to beat you. Aaron's an awesome dude. He will not be watching this podcast, though. So I'm going to say, realistically, I think he could push 4,000 yards, which doesn't, I mean, that's not predicting like, an 11-win season or something. And I think the Texans, look, right now the over-under is hovering somewhere between, 5.5, 6.5 wins. I think most of them have it at 5.5. I haven't kept up with it in a while. Like, if you can win 6 games, that means you could easily also only win 3 games or also win 9 games with a little bit of luck. I think the X factor with the Texans is going to be special teams and how much defensive improvement they can make. Like, I don't think they have the horses to really be a genuinely solid defense, but I think they can not be the worst run defense in the league like they were last year. So that's what nudges me up towards taking the over on 6.5 wins. So if I say, I don't think it's insane if somebody starts saying 7 or 8 wins. They'll be labeled insane, and all the group think would be that you're idiots and all that. But I think that that's possible. Or as Bubba Homeschool would tell you, 17-0. Obviously, unless you're a hater, it's 17-0. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Screen recording. Let's see if this is the Matthew Berry.
Rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud.
There we go. Let me get the volume back up because Frank Ross had me messing with the volume, messing with the Zoom. There we go.
CJ, first off, congratulations. Welcome to the league, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Talk to me about, I'm just curious a little.
Okay, we got to talk about CJ's outfit here too in a second.
A little bit about the pre-draft process. There was so much, I can't, whatever, there was so much, whatever, you guys bleep it out. But there was so much before the draft. I was curious just in terms of you, in terms of what you were hearing directly from the people in your camp about where you thought you might go and the teams that were talking to you.
Okay, so real quick before CJ answers, sorry to interrupt CJ. The outfit, he's wearing the NFLPA shorts provided for him at that event, I'm guessing, unless he just liked them, because he's also wearing his jersey, and that was part of like the jersey unveilings was part of that event they did for the NFLPA back there a couple weeks ago. So one, those jerseys are not meant to be worn without shoulder pads, and it's never a good look. You feel like an idiot when you're a player wearing them. And look, even if you've got a good physique like CJ Stroud, it's not a good look. But then if you're an offensive or a defensive lineman, it feels like you're being punished. Like, it feels like, why are you having me dance around in a what looks like a fat suit, but it's my actual fat because your shoulders look tiny. You're a big guy. You're an NFL offensive or defensive lineman. At least you usually have a chest and shoulders to offset whatever paunch you got. But these jerseys rob you of it because they're cut to be very, very tight against the shoulder pads. And then the short shorts, which is what the kids do these days. I can't bring myself to do it. I feel like I've got shorts that are above my knees now, and I feel naked to the world. Like I might as well be streaking every time I go anywhere. Although I do enjoy the freedom and the wind chill against my patellas. Feels better. Third thing, Matthew Berry. I've never been a big fantasy football guy, and I followed it more the last couple of years. I feel like he's too nice for television. I feel like he feels like a genuinely good dude, and I'm glad that he's been able to find success while like actually being a genuine, decently human being. Now, there's lots of guys that are decent, decent human beings, but almost your TV persona ends up being a little bit more brash and loud and everything than you are in your normal life. Matthew Berry feels like he's just like a nice, quiet, bookish guy, and that's how he's going to be on film too. So good for you, Matthew Berry.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a blessing just to be able to have opportunity to get drafted and go through the whole combine process and the pro day, even though it's very long-winded and stressful. But at the same time, I mean, I think I have good people problems. Like the things that were coming out, I mean, for me, is like at the end of the day, it would be a bad thing if things weren't being said, good or bad, because shoot, I'm a topic, I guess. So I try to look at it as a different, as a way just to learn from it. It's not the first time things have came out about me, so I'm not saying I'm used to it in a sense, but I kind of am. It's just, it is what it is, and I'm not gonna try to control the narrative. And I know it was from an inside source somewhere where they were hating on me or whatever. But at the end of the day, man, I'm powered through God, and at the end of the day, it is what it is. I mean, everything happens for a reason, and I'm a Texan, so it really didn't matter anyway.
No,
That part there, though, it came from an inside source somewhere. That's a part, man. I don't know. He's handling it the right way. The old rap lyric is if you ain't got no haters, you ain't popping. That's a good one. And just the general philosophy of like, hey, look, as long as if you're achieving anything worthwhile or even any sort of notoriety, you're going to have haters. So you better embrace it because it's actually a good thing. Some people are better at embracing it than others. Like like on the media side of things, I've always been amazed that Nick Wright is just Nick Wright does not care. Like it's amazing, like to be comfortable with that level of hate. So I know Nick Wright personally, obviously, from the days at Sports Radio 610. He just like genuinely is able to not care about it, and it's awesome. Him knowing that it obviously came from an inside source. I would encourage him not to think too deep and hard about that because sometimes there are unethical, unscrupulous people out there. I hope he didn't think that it meant it came from inside his camp. No, he's thinking about the S2 cognition and that it came from an inside source. So, okay, all right. Maybe he's throwing shade at Bryce Young's people. I don't know.
it didn't at all. And smart guy once told me pressure's a privilege. Right?
For sure.
Pressure's a
Guys
privilege.
like us.
Okay, I like that. Pressure is a privilege. I'm going to write that down.
In our position, we want pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah, my team, we weren't worried at all. We were actually kind of relaxed the whole time. At least I was. And I heard nothing but great things from teams. I didn't hear anything negative, really. So
it was more like just social BS.
Yeah, the people who aren't making the picks had the most to say. So.
Well,
I'll tell you too. It is funny when like the various people and or like the Vegas odds that had Will Levis going as high as he was supposed to go. And CJ Stroud, however damaging all these reports were going to be about him and how far he would have fallen. Like at the very least, there's a story out of Indianapolis that says that the Colts felt like CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson were the two top guys. And they didn't even, they had them at the same tier. It was just obviously you're looking for a different type of guy. So with them, now the story that comes out afterwards is like, of course, but ultimately we really wanted Anthony Richardson. I don't know. Suffice it to say that there were other teams that had CJ Stroud ranked very high and some above Bryce Young. I'm just going to go on ahead and for my own sanity, I am going to pretend that the Texans would have drafted CJ Stroud even if they had picked number 1 overall. So we can hopefully put to bed forever any kind of hand-wringing or consternation over the victory in the last game of the year. Especially if CJ outplays Bryce Young, then it doesn't matter. It all worked out for everybody.
I mean, right, and you went number 2 overall in the NFL draft. I'd say you're winning, right?
It's a blessing, yes.
100%. What I'm curious in terms of, so what are the Texans getting in CJ Stroud?
They're getting CJ Stroud. So
right.
just a man of God, a person who's going to come.
It's a tough question to answer, except that I feel like he's been prepared for it through all of these pre-draft interviews. But that feels a little bit like if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be type of question.
I'm in the lead every day. I'm going to work his tail off to win games, and I'm going to do anything in his power to be a great, not only football player, but a man in the community to represent the Texans organization as best as I can. So I'm very excited that I already got to get to work with some of the guys, building a great relationship with everybody. I mean, it's really just trying to build this thing up, man. I definitely think we have a great young team with some young pieces, but we have some vets we brought in that are going to be a key point while we're going to win games. And the best thing about it for me, just bringing myself, is just I'm going to be myself, and that's wholeheartedly. So I can't wait to finally get to the season and play. But for right now, we're just building chemistry, camaraderie, trying to build that brotherhood, because the closest teams are the best teams. So.
Okay. Closest teams are the best teams. I like that. I also like, he had that 1,000-yard stare in his eyes by the end of that because he'd given that answer so many times. Man of God, care about my teammates, bring in some veteran leaders, got to have respect for the veterans, which I don't fault him for at all because he's had to answer this question a million times. But he's also at one of these events where they are trying to squeeze every last little penny out of CJ Stroud and Bryce Young and these other rookies before these guys get wise to what's going on.
And honestly, it's a huge compliment to you. I mean, to your point, it is a young team, it's a rebuilding team, and the Texans said we're we're going to draft this kid and we're going to make him the face of our franchise, and like that doesn't happen for a lot of rookies, and so that's a huge compliment to you and the kind of person you are.
Yes,
so,
sir. Thank you.
I heard. So I was.
Yes, thank you, Matthew Berry. Again, you're like the Mr. Rogers of modern sports media. You're too good for us. We don't deserve you. The candle in the background equals good energy, hand green crystal ball. I don't know what that part means, Wild Thing. Usually you say intelligent things, so I'm assuming that's a good reference to something, but I'm not getting it. It's actually a Edison bulb. My wife's big on the Edison bulbs. And that's a little print. I'm going to take the glass out of this. Obviously, this is a work in progress behind me. That's a little old-timey map of Houston. I love these old-time maps of places. And then up above, I've got that pewter Texans helmet that people love so much. Problem is that's on a short shelf, so it looks like it's just resting on top of my head. And thus concludes our interior decorating portion of the segment. So, Matthew Berry, I think he was talking about something.
Eavesdropping on another interview you did, and you said your favorite player growing up as a kid was Michael Vick.
Yes, sir.
And so I'm curious about that because obviously he was a great quarterback, obviously, but his playing style is very different than yours.
Right.
So I was curious why Michael was your favorite player.
Well, I love.
By the way, are we back to Michael or is it still Mike Vick? I take back everything nice I said about Matthew Berry if he mispronounced Mike Vick.
Falcons Vic, but I really was pretty young when he was playing for them. So my favorite.
By the way,
directly from people in your camp about
son of a bitch.
where you are.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I heard. So I was eavesdropping on another interview you did, and you said your quarterback, obviously.
Love Falcons Vic, but
okay, you want to feel old? It was that Michael Vick was drafted in 2001. And 6 months later, C.J. Stroud was born. So, yeah, C.J. Stroud did not know much at all about Falcons Michael Vick. He would have known about Eagles Michael Vick because by the time C.J. was 8, 9, 10 years old, Vick he'd been through some things. He'd seen some stuff. And he emerged in Philadelphia where he was much more of a not as much of a dual threat quarterback, but obviously still a menace with his legs.
I really was pretty young when he was playing for them. So my favorite Michael Vick was the Eagles.
Sure.
Where he was throwing the ball really, really well. So yeah, people always kind of get them. But I modeled my game after him in a sense, but it was really his passing style. Like he had a cannon that nobody really gave him credit for.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't. I know I can't run like him, and I don't think he can throw like me. But
very few people in the world can run like him.
100%. So I've probably been.
That's where I felt like feel like CJ is going to be the victim of some clickbait where somebody just takes that second part of the quote about Mike Vick not being able to pass like CJ Stroud because Matthew Berry, although a nice guy, did step on that money line there. Like that was a good hook, except that. Matthew Berry stepped over it, didn't hear it. It wasn't like he was interrupting or anything, but maybe not that many people will pick up on it. I think that he's correct in that. Yeah, Mike Vick, boy, he could sling it and could really take advantage of like his threat of running to open up some deep balls, and he was really good at hitting some of those deep balls. But I don't think he had the same accuracy or ball placement of CJ Stroud. But CJ Stroud also, because he tends to do this, would have mentioned that he was just teasing or just playing or something. He's very good about that, of like softening things when he's sarcastic.
And 3 of them now. I feel like Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson are probably the only 2 right now in the league that can run like him. But yeah, man, it was more so like an inspiration thing that he just inspired me as a kid just to want to be a NFL quarterback.
What you recently got a chance to sit down with Tom Brady. I'm curious. Give me one piece of advice that you got from Tom that really stuck with you.
Really just keeping the main thing. That everything that you're wanting to happen, if you take care of business in the locker room, in the weight room, in the film room, in the practice field, everything's gonna take care of itself. So a lot of other things, but man, that was one part that I definitely needed to hear, and was very grateful for him taking all this time.
Oh, you know what, guys? By the way, that's not special. That's not defensive coordinator Matt Burke. In case any of you are confused, that's Matt Berry and CJ Stroud. So, let me get this up here.
Yeah, it was cool just to sort of see it on social.
Yeah, keeping the main thing. That's another thing that he's reiterated a few times. Remember, if you haven't seen the video where I broke down basically 45 seconds of audio of the advice given to those guys for about 27 minutes. I highly encourage you to go back and watch that 27 minutes of breaking down 4 minutes of like 1 minute of video or less, 45 seconds of video or so. Let's see. There's a question here. Who's the vocal guy on offense? Who's the vocal take charge leader? Laramie Tunsil has kind of become way more of a leader and more vocal and he's taking more ownership in the team than anybody expected him to. Obviously, back when, remember like a year ago this time, we were talking about whether Laramie Tunsil was going to get traded or demand a trade or whatever it might be, or at least heading into the draft. I can't remember. And then, by midway through the season, he's stripping the captain's patch off of Brandon Cook's jersey and slapping it onto his own, like in some kind of military ceremony. I think I'm wondering about Shaq Mason. I don't know what Shaq Mason is like personality-wise. I love that he's a 6'1" offensive guard in the NFL. It feels like he's got to be as tough as Mike Tyson to like, and he does, like, the way he plays, he kind of uses his height to his advantage. He's a bit of a dense, like shotgun slug of a dude that can get up into guys and just kind of stun them. So I don't know if he's the vocal guy or not. CJ Stroud, I think if he plays well and makes progress, could be that guy. And then, it's hard to say after that. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to be Dalton Schultz, especially just here on a 1-year deal. That's a good question. I predict CJ will not be good in his upcoming HEB commercials. The hell, man. That's some bad juju you're bringing to us. The last guy to not be good in his HEB commercials was Brock Osweiler. Perhaps the only guy to not be good in his HEB commercials. That's what they should do. They should have these guys do an HEB commercial at the combine with their 15 minutes of allotted time. Have them do some kind of goofy HEB commercial and see if it plays. See if it feels right. Because with Brock Osweiler, it didn't feel right, and I felt bad because he was actually trying. Like some of the guys, like Altuve's not like. Altuve wouldn't win any acting awards with his, and yet he's one of the best just because it's Altuve and because they kind of like he's bad in the way that you want your athlete to be bad at commercials. It's almost like if an athlete is too good at commercials, you're like, all right, man, I don't know. Like, do you even like sports? What the hell's going on here? Altuve is the perfect amount because he just comes off as so innocent and young and just acting in the school play. Maybe it's his stature. But I think CJ will be good. He's shown some personality, man. Remember his press conference? He showed way more personality than you're giving him credit for. When I keep hearing keep the main thing, I always think back to STD. Yeah, strong, tough, dependable. It's I think with DeMeco so far, we've heard in playing with intention or operating with intention. Hair on fire is a big one. The SWARM acronym, which is the SWARM acronym, which is smart. Oh man, smart work ethic, and smart. I don't know. Shoot, I can't believe I'm messing up the SWARM. So, smart, work hard, and a relentless mindset. I don't know. Yeah, you agree with my SWARM acronym. I'll just assume you're talking about me. Pena getting better at the HEB commercials. He is. If you get drafted by Houston, saying I'm going to HEB, yeah, that's what. I wonder if these guys realize the money train that's there for them at HEB, and honestly, how much they can become a cult hero, maybe just by being good at the commercials. I wonder if I could pull up an old Casa Olay commercial with Jose Lima for any of the young kids out there that don't know or understand or love the Casa Olay commercials. Here we go. Oh boy, here we go. Jose Lima, dearly departed, legend, not just in Houston, but also all of Major League Baseball. Let's see. Share this screen. Tell me if you guys, you know what, you might not get the audio on this, so we'll have to see. Hopefully you get the audio. Tell me in the comments right quick as soon as I start playing this whether you get it or not. He's not started playing yet, everybody. Just hold on. A lot of you kids aren't going to understand exactly why. Oh, there was no audio. I was just dancing for nothing. Son of a bitch. I've noticed that with the when I share screens like that, it doesn't work. All right, we'll figure that out on StreamYard. I'll ask Landry Locker for his advice. Let's see. CJ Stroud needs to visit another Houston legend and do a commercial for Gallery Furniture. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me, man. Mac. Oh boy. How do you guys feel about Gallery Sports not working out? I felt like Gallery Sports had some potential. I do think that there's something that they could do. Like even if it's not Gallery Furniture or somebody else like that, like I think the Gallery went around about it the wrong way, and it was almost like they tried to replicate a old school website, like which it feels weird to say, but it's true. The stuff that worked 10 years ago or 15 years ago isn't going to work necessarily today as a startup. Like they tried to start with bloggers, with video content, like doing all this stuff, where I think honestly, like a YouTube channel or something like that makes a lot more sense and can get more quick traction. I've had this argument with a lot of people in the industry at various places about just like, listen, like you guys have resources available, like things that YouTube does things better than other private companies right now or media companies that might want to. They're trying to pull viewers to their website, which is cool and good, but like people don't want to watch your 45-second to a minute long commercial. They don't like the fact that it takes forever to load. Like YouTube just flat out does things a lot better, and they're very generous compared to Facebook or other places. I'm going to get way too inside baseball here. But like YouTube compared to like Facebook, they don't penalize you for trying to make a buck on YouTube. Facebook finds out you're trying to make a buck and they're like, whoa, yeah, how about you pay to boost this post? We don't want to let the people find what they want to find. Where with YouTube, it still seems like they're committed to like, okay, we're going to let people find what they want to find. If it's a monetized thing, then it's monetized, then so be it. But they're not going to try to do it all like that. They needed more cool podcasts like yours, bro. Well, thank you very much. Caso Lay Fresh today. People want to interact. Yeah, I think there's that too. That's why I have a hard time with that because I really enjoy the live streaming and I like taking the questions. But then when it comes to like doing actual videos, like those things obviously hit big. But you also got to edit them afterwards. Like like doing the live stream and then editing it down into chunks afterwards is the way to go, and something I probably got to be better at, or at least hire a kid to do for me. You know, like that's what McAfee does. McAfee does his 3-hour show. They chop up the best parts and spit it out on social media all over the place. So, like McAfee. So what's ESPN doing with McAfee? They're taking a guy that's got a YouTube channel already. He pulls people to their platform, and they're going to let him continue to do it on YouTube. And I think it's more of like a business partnership than it is hiring. Like, there's a reason, basically. McAfee, like, I don't know how much McAfee will make personally. I know how much he's going to get. I know how much his company is getting paid to put his show on ESPN. When it comes to production costs and everything like that, like the $17 million a year that he's making at ESPN, I don't think that's his net. It's not like a salary. I think it's him getting pulled in to bring everything with him. So he still has those people to pay and everything, but ESPN is going to be able to manage the load for him. So whatever. I think that makes a lot more sense instead of ESPN basically trying to force feed their way of doing things. Use AI. The only thing, Nino G, about AI is that, like, so far I've messed around with it a little bit for a few things. I like actually using it to extract outlines and bullet points from articles. So like I'll read an article, I'll paste it into AI. AI spits out an outline and it helps me organize my thoughts. We're like, okay, yeah. And then I can kind of cross out what I don't want to use on air or what I want to use on air and add some stats to it. So it does a good job of creating a nice outline for me. But as far as like using it for editing and all that other stuff, it takes a long time just to learn how to use the AI efficiently. Even for me getting bullet points out and everything, I've probably spent like 5-6 hours like coming up with the most efficient way to do it for what I need and for my purposes. So yeah, ultimately you're probably correct. It's just not, I'm not quite there yet. How do you feel with AI and maybe using that for editing? Yeah, I guess that's what I gotta look into it a little bit. I gotta spend maybe Saturday figuring out AI and how I can use it with the editing and to simplify things for me. A couple people have suggested, that's all right, Nino, don't worry about it. He said, sorry, repeat question. It's a good thought provider. Sometimes I'll go and I'll talk to my wife for 5 minutes and she won't say anything. And at the end I say, thanks a lot. That helped out a lot. I figure you helped me figure that out. And she'll be like, cool, I'll take the credit for that. I read the 48 Laws of Power. What's your AI girlfriend's name? Can I do that? Can I create like over time on my chat GP, whatever? I could just like, you kind of train it to be like, hey, I want you to, I'll plug in an article of like the 10 different articles about how to be a good girlfriend. Well, mistress in my instance. And then I want to be able to have correspondence with you in which you bolster my self-esteem. We'll be pen pals. Okay. We'll go with that. I'll have to bring Brandy in on it just so she sees and monitors. It's like every now and then I have to, like, during the Deshaun Watson scenario, I had to tell Brandy, I was like, listen, just so you know, I don't want to be I'll do this on incognito mode, but just so you know, I am going to be Googling how do people go about getting dirty massages versus like how do they suggest, like there's like what do they get arrested for in this instance, like I'm being very transparent here. I'm going to be Googling some stuff that looks super super shady because I got to talk about this super shady situation. So it was all cool. I don't really have a good explanation to her as to why I'm still Googling that stuff, but at the time it was a pretty good cover. Let's see. So let's call it a day there. And oh my God, it's been 2 hours and 15 minutes. And maybe I'll go find some AI to chop up some of these interviews and stick it out there as we begin our march towards becoming the next Pat McAfee show. Except I, just like Pat McAfee, will promise that I'll never sign with ESPN. But I think I would follow through on it because I don't think I'm at the same stage. I don't need it. Like I don't want that level. I don't aspire to that level. I do not need big corporate anything in my life right now. I'm pretty happy with my life and I like doing this kind of stuff. But my ceiling for this would never be like, God, I hope I'm making $20 million a year and I can sell out to ESPN to make it easier. I would just keep growing organically. Maybe I'd go public at some point and remain the majority stockholder and keep all of you on it discounted. You guys would get stock options and everything. Obviously, not a monster.